He was thrown out of the rally for wearing a red MAGA hat, accused of provocation without anyone bothering to find out who he was. The officer was confident in his actions, but had no idea he had just ejected someone whose voice could change the entire city. The hero's response to this humiliation shocked everyone. A bustling square in front of the municipal building teems with people. Flags flutter gently in the breeze, colorful signs rise above the crowd, and the occasional crackle of speakers punctuates the air. This is a peaceful rally, drawing people of all ages, energetic students, middle-class professionals, and a handful of elderly activists sporting comfortable sneakers. At the center of it all stands Tom Wilson, a man with distinguished features and the poise of someone accustomed to attention. His navy blazer and classic jeans suggest restraint, but the red MAGA hat on his head draws curious and wary glances. Tom listens to the speaker with a faint smile. His posture is relaxed, his gaze fixed on the orator. The calm, however, is disrupted by the approach of Sergeant Jackson. Tall, with a buzz cut and a face seemingly chiseled from stone, Jackson strides toward Tom with purpose. His crisp uniform is flawlessly pressed, and his belt gleams with polished utility tools. The faces in the crowd turn toward Jackson, sensing an impending confrontation. "Sir!" The sergeant's commanding voice cuts through the ambient hum. "Remove your hat." Tom turns his head, raising an eyebrow, but his demeanor remains steady. His voice is calm, yet loud enough for nearby onlookers to hear. "Excuse me, Sergeant, but why?" The crowd begins to buzz with murmurs. Some whisper about the situation, while others pull out their phones to record the unfolding events. Jackson takes another step forward, his piercing gaze locked on Tom. "It's provoking people," the sergeant replies, articulating his words slowly, as if explaining something self-evident. Tom nods with a hint of irony. "Interesting. Would you mind clarifying how my hat poses a threat to public order?" Jackson narrows his eyes slightly. His tone hardens, his voice growing louder as he steps closer. "This is not up for debate, sir. Either you remove it, or you'll have to leave the rally." Shouts break out from the crowd. "Leave him alone! He's not doing anything." Some continue recording, while others voice their support for Tom. The mounting reactions seem to strengthen Jackson's resolve. With a sharp motion of his hand, he declares, "Get rid of the provocation. We won't tolerate conflict here." Tom sighs and steps forward, now standing face to face with the sergeant. His voice remains steady, but takes on a firm edge. "Sergeant, as far as I know, I'm not breaking any laws. I have the right to express my beliefs. Or are you aware of a law banning hats?" The crowd stirs, some laughing softly. Jackson's face reddens slightly, but he quickly regains composure. Taking a step back, he raises his voice for all to hear. "This individual is being asked to leave the rally for provocative behavior." Tom smirks and gently shakes his head. Turning to a nearby woman holding up her phone, he remarks, "Seems we have different definitions of provocation. It's not a hat, ma'am. It's a test of tolerance." Fuming, Jackson points sharply toward the exit. "Come with me, now!" The crowd erupts into a mix of shouts and whispers. Tom turns back to Jackson, his voice calm but louder now, resonating through the square. "Are you sure you want to continue, Sergeant? Everything here is being recorded." The final image of the scene. Tom, head held high, follows Jackson out of the square, still wearing his hat. The crowd continues recording, shouting, and clapping in support. A young man in a t-shirt with a slogan yells out, "Next time, bring a scarf too! Maybe he'll ban that." A shadow of sarcasm hangs over the square as the audience realizes this spectacle is just beginning. Jackson firmly grabs Tom by the elbow and, without ceremony, begins escorting him out of the crowd. Despite the physical pressure, Tom moves calmly, almost gracefully, as though humoring the sergeant. His back remains straight, his gaze fixed forward. The phones of onlookers follow their every step, capturing the scene as if it were a pivotal moment in a movie. The crowd grows louder and shouts break out. "This is discrimination! Leave him alone! He didn't break any rules!" Jackson, on the other hand, starts to lose his composure. His face reddens, and his movements become abrupt. He casts a furious glance over his shoulder at the shouting crowd, but doesn't slow his pace. "Keep moving, sir," he says, his tone more of an order than a request. Tom raises an eyebrow slightly and remarks with a touch of irony, "Do you always treat peaceful rally participants this warmly, Sergeant?" This comment draws chuckles from the crowd. Jackson clenches his teeth but says nothing. People begin following them, forming an impromptu corridor. Comments ripple through the onlookers. "The cop's overreacting. The guy in the hat is handling it better than he is." When they reach the edge of the square, Jackson spins Tom around, releases his elbow, and loudly declares for all to hear, "You are disturbing public order. Leave, or you'll be arrested." Tom slowly turns to face Jackson, brushing off his blazer as if dusting off an invisible speck. "Sergeant," he begins with disarming politeness, "do you really think this is worth your reputation?" "I'm doing my job," Jackson barks, avoiding direct eye contact with Tom. Tom smiles, a mix of sarcasm and disappointment playing on his lips. "Ah, yes, calling discrimination your job. That's a bold innovation." The crowd stirs. Shouts emerge. "He's right! Shame on the police!" Jackson raises a hand to demand silence. "This man is being removed for provocative behavior. If he returns, he will be arrested." An elderly man's voice rings out from the crowd. "Provocative behavior? You mean wearing a hat?" The crowd bursts into laughter again, but Tom raises a hand, signaling for calm. His voice, steady and firm, carries above the noise. "Everyone, this isn't a moment for chaos. It's a moment to recognize how important it is to respect each other, even those who fear my choice of headwear." His words are met with applause. Jackson, now visibly angrier, points toward the exit. "Leave, now." Suddenly, a bystander, a young man holding a camera, shouts, "Sergeant, what will your boss say when he sees this video?" Jackson's face turns crimson. He starts to turn toward the man, but the cameraman vanishes into the crowd. Tom casts one last glance at the crowd, nods slightly, and begins walking toward the exit. His stride remains confident, his posture unshaken. From behind him, a woman's voice rings out loudly. "That man is a true leader." For a moment, the crowd erupts into applause. Jackson, staring after Tom, seems to hesitate, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. But he quickly reasserts his rigid professionalism, though something in his expression betrays the realization that the situation is spiraling out of control. The scene closes with Tom turning back briefly. His gaze is calm yet defiant. The cameras remain fixed on him, capturing every move. The crowd parts to let him pass, their eyes filled with admiration. Jackson stands frozen, fists clenched, knowing full well that this story is far from over. The crowd begins to disperse, but tension lingers in the air. The hum of conversations slowly dies down, though some people remain, unwilling to leave. Among them are those still holding their phones, recording the aftermath. At that moment, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulls into the square. Its polished exterior gleams in the sunlight, instantly drawing everyone's attention. The vehicle parks near the commotion, and a man in a sharp navy blue suit steps out. This is Mark Sampson, the city's mayor. Tall, fit, with a confident gaze and a faint smirk that only amplifies his charisma. He quickly surveys the square, taking in the cluster of onlookers and the rigid figure of Sergeant Jackson. Without hesitation, Mark strides toward him, his steps brisk and purposeful. "Sergeant Jackson, what's going on here?" His voice is loud, cutting through the remnants of noise. All heads turn toward him. Jackson freezes, then awkwardly snaps to something resembling attention. The color drains from his face, and his confidence evaporates in an instant. Good afternoon, sir," he begins, his tone lacking its usual authority. "We had a minor incident. This man," he gestures toward Tom, "was disturbing the public order." Tom, who had been standing calmly off to the side, steps forward. His expression remains composed, but a glint of irony dances in his eyes. Slowly, he removes his hat, smiling as he speaks. "Isn't it curious, Mayor Sampson, that Sergeant Jackson decided to remove me from the rally because of this hat? Mark stops in his tracks, his sharp eyes moving from Tom to Jackson. A faint, almost imperceptible smile crosses his lips. "Tom," he says, his tone shifting to one of familiarity. "It's been a while. I trust you haven't forgotten that you're opening the council meeting today." The square falls silent. A wave of astonishment ripples through the crowd. Whispering ceases entirely, and Jackson looks as though he's been struck by lightning. His eyes widen, and for a moment, he's completely speechless. "Opening?" he stammers, looking back and forth between Tom and the mayor. "Wait, who is he?" Mark straightens, his voice now firm but carrying a hint of amusement. "This is Tom Wilson, my deputy and the head of the Civil Rights Commission." His voice carries more weight than any of ours. The crowd erupts into hushed murmurs. "Deputy Mayor? Is he serious? This can't be real." Jackson takes a step back as though physically retreating from the consequences of his actions. His face flushes crimson and his lips press into a thin line. I didn't know," he begins, but Mark cuts him off with a sharp gesture. "Jackson, that's no excuse. If you want to uphold your position, you should learn to assess a situation before acting, especially when it involves my deputies." Tom suppresses a grin, keeping his expression neutral, but with a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Stepping closer to Jackson, he holds out the hat and says with mock sincerity, "Sergeant, care to try it on? Maybe you'll wear it with the same confidence." Laughter ripples through the crowd. Someone claps loudly in support of the joke. Jackson lowers his gaze, his fists clenching at his sides. Mark turns to the crowd, raising a hand to regain their attention. This incident serves as a reminder that every individual deserves respect, regardless of their beliefs. That is what makes our city strong. The crowd responds with thunderous applause. Jackson remains frozen in place, as if glued to the ground, while Tom gives a small nod of gratitude to those around him and walks with Mark towards City Hall. The final note of the scene is a quiet remark from an observer. "Tried to kick a man out of the rally and now he's the star of the show." The crowd erupts into applause, laughter, and cheers of approval. Sergeant Jackson, standing frozen in place, realizes that the situation has spiraled completely out of his control. His face burns with embarrassment, and his eyes dart between Tom and the mayor, as though searching for support that clearly won't come. "I'm sorry. I didn't know," he finally mutters, his voice laden with awkwardness. Tom takes a step closer, his expression calm, though a glimmer of subtle sarcasm sparkles in his eyes. "Sometimes it helps to get to know a person before judging them by their appearance," he says with polite intonation, which only adds weight to his words. The crowd murmurs its approval, with voices rising. That's the truth. A real leader, not just empty slogans. Mayor Sampson, now facing the people, raises his hand to call for quiet. His voice is firm, yet it carries the warmth of a confident and empathetic leader. "Let this incident be a lesson for all of us. The city we're building must respect every individual, regardless of their beliefs, appearance, or convictions. That's the foundation of our unity and strength." The crowd roars with applause. People continue filming the scene on their phones, shouting words of support for Tom. Amid the cheers and laughter, scattered remarks can be heard. "The sergeant's gonna have a lot of explaining to do. This is already trending on TikTok. Get ready for 1 million views." The cameras capture everything. The mayor's satisfied smile, Tom nodding modestly in response to the crowd's admiration, and Jackson standing off to the side, staring at the ground as if wishing it would swallow him whole. From the crowd, an elderly man's voice rises above the noise. "Now that's what dignity looks like. A lesson for all of us." Laughter and applause grow even louder, creating a vibrant hum of energy as Tom and Mark head towards City Hall. But just before they take their final steps, Tom removes his red MAGA hat, looks at it thoughtfully, and with a small smile remarks, "Maybe it's time to switch it out. How about a cowboy hat? At least it'd give them a better reason to arrest me." The quip triggers another round of laughter and applause. Even Mark can't help but laugh as he pats Tom on the shoulder. "If you do wear a cowboy hat, I'm sure you'll still look like a statesman, he jokes. The crowd begins to slowly disperse, buzzing with conversation about what just transpired. Meanwhile, the videos taken during the event are already spreading across social media. By morning, clips have gone viral, appearing on news websites under headlines like "Cop ejects Deputy Mayor from Rally Over a Hat" and "Tolerance Triumphs Over Bias in City Square Drama." Jackson becomes the center of public criticism, forced to explain his actions to his superiors while facing backlash from citizens online. Tom, on the other hand, emerges as a symbol of dignity and tolerance. In an interview with a local news station, he calmly reflects on the incident. This situation reminds us that appearances or beliefs don't define a person. Respect and dialogue are what truly unite us. His words resonate deeply, and thousands of comments pour in, praising his composure. One commenter writes, "Now this is the kind of leadership we need." The story concludes with a touch of humor. Back in the mayor's office, Tom places the hat on the desk and quips, "Maybe we should put this in a museum, as a symbol of common sense winning out." Mark chuckles and replies, "Or we could give it to Jackson, a little reminder of how important tolerance is." And so, a simple hat becomes the centerpiece of a story that redefines the power of calm resolve and the strength of dignity.